I don't have space on my bookshelf for this nonsense.
Not worth. Welcome. You're listening to Nuditea, a podcast where we get naked with our feelings while drinking tea. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Wendy, and on this podcast we talk about life, food, travel, love. Sometimes we have special friends with us. Not today. It's just me and Kim today. We're talking about New Year's resolutions, 2019, and also 2020 update because we're 3 months into coronavirus season, and there's been a lot of time for reading, for me at least, this year so far. So we wanted to give a quick overview of how our reading challenge went down in 2019. But first, teas.
Always teas. I'm drinking the Japanese matcha. Yeah. Nailed it. First try. And this is the one I bought 2 years ago when I was in Japan before you, but now I'm drinking it because we're trying to get through teas. And I mean, I remember liking it.
No, it's really good. It's the roasted rice
Anytime
matcha.
You got roasted rice in it, I'm like, I'm there for it.
And then I am drinking a ginger green tea. It just smelled so good. Oh, that's good. Okay.
So Wendy, how did your New Year's resolution of just reading at least a book a month, but you were trying to, I guess, push for more,
well,
if you could, but not putting too much pressure on yourself?
So to give a recap, if you didn't listen to or watch our previous New Year's resolutions video and podcast, the reading challenge that I have been heavily invested in is just to read more, to encourage myself to read more by setting a monthly goal of at least one book, which might seem really sad, but before 2018 I was kind of not doing that, and I felt really sad about not reading a lot. So in 2019 I just barely missed the mark.
You didn't? I thought you did it.
I read a total of 20 books in 2019. However, in October 2019, I failed. I did not finish a single book in October 2019.
I mean, you still read 20 books, though.
I still read 20 books, which is exactly the same number of books that I read in 2018. I kind of wish that I could have upped myself a little bit. Honestly, if I had just finished one more book in October, I would have been 21 compared to 2018, which was 20, and that would have made me feel so good. But you know what? It's 2020, it's a new year, I'm off to a great start already, but we'll get into that. So we're going to talk about our favorite picks.
Did you want me to talk about my failure of a year?
I mean, we both failed, technically.
Yeah. No, I like that you're like, I read 20 books. I was pushing for that 21. I think I did January and maybe October. No, November. I did not have a very reading year. Except for, if I was reading, it was not your classic novels. I started with a graphic novel, or a few, because our thing was I had to read 5 versus at least 1 novel a month. But I don't know, I just wasn't in the reading mood, which happens. I go in my bouts. And I was reading a lot of plays or like fan fiction. I was revisiting a lot of the stories I have read in the past and really liked. So I guess I probably read more. No.
The point is, if you felt obliged to read just even a little more than you would have normally done, I think that's a win. So even if out of the 12 months you had like 2-3 months where you were like, I should read something, I would say we've accomplished our overall goal of just to
I don't know if I even did that.
More.
I just have like backlog books now that I've been meaning to read.
Yeah, I'm looking at this calendar. I made an Excel sheet of my books that I read every month and my ratings for each book out of 10. I gave you Educated in January 2019.
Yeah,
guess who still hasn't read Educated?
Yeah, our friend
a year and 3 months later.
Our friend Ben gave me a book by Watsky before we went to the concert, so I could like get in the headspace of Watsky. Still in my room. I'm sorry, Ben. I will rate it probably after I read Educated and get that back to you. Not bad.
Educated is first, though.
Yes,
it's so good.
Yeah, we can go in. So mine is less like recommendations of books I read this past year. It's more just books I read in the past that I think are pretty good. Mm-hmm. Give them a read. But Wendy is sticking more to the criteria, the curriculum, if you will.
Usual format of these New Year's resolution read more videos. We've done one. I say that as if we have like a format down. We've done one.
The past 12 years we've been doing this now.
Well, for the past 12 months, again, I read enough books. I'm still sad about October, but I'm slowly trying to heal that wound. I do have some really good recommendations. I found an author that I really was into in 2019, now less so. And I'm just realizing that I should have looked up her name.
You can do that now.
You know what? Doesn't matter. I honestly...
Not one to remember.
I'm over it, but I just wanted to give a shout out to my 3 favorite books and 1 honorable mention.
Okay. Can I also get your worst book?
Yes.
Of the year?
That one I also just have in the back of my brain. So I rate books on a scale of 1 to 10 because I feel like that just gives me a little more freedom. I feel like a lot of people who rate on a scale of 1 to 5, I feel very restricted by that because sometimes you just want a little more on that scale to be able to work with.
But if you take the scale of 5 and do point somethings, you've then created a 10-point scale, essentially.
Exactly. But usually people who are on a 5-star scale do not do point something. I mean, at least the people that I have been very into on the booktubes. I think I like the 10 star scale system, and that is what I am doing. So all 3 of these favorites from 2019 were 10-star books. 10 out of 10 books. The first is Educated, which Kim has not read, so I'll keep it to a minimum. Essentially, it's this woman's autobiography. It's her retelling her childhood into adulthood life, and it's just very interesting because she grew up in a very crazy, volatile, twisted, and primitive environment where her parents and most of her siblings all had very not so progressive viewpoints on how children should be raised, how sisters or siblings should be treated, how you should go about living in the society that we live in. It was just a very captivating book. It was a whole new world to see and experience from the perspective of this girl who grew up thinking that this was going to be her life, and she was very accepting of it, and then growing out of that role in a very traumatic and explosive way over time. So it's just basically a huge dumpster fire in a good way of this person's life and how she came to be the person she is now. It's just like very vivid imagery and emotions. You might cry. I've already told you this, but I feel like Kim's gonna cry.
I cry pretty easily at books. I've almost cried at I have cried at a graphic novel. I cry at everything. So if Wendy almost cried or did cry, I'm probably fucking crying. It's just how it is.
I have never cried reading a book. However, I get very depressed for days and days. And I think while reading Educated over the course of, I don't know, maybe a couple days, I was depressed all of those days that I was reading Educated until probably closer to the end of the book where a lot of her issues get resolved emotionally. So it's just an amazing, incredible book. I super recommend. The second one is by the author that I mentioned before that I really like, but I can't remember her name. I think it's Zheng Chang. I love how I'm using the white person accent because I don't know what the word characters are in Chinese. It's a Chinese author because then I don't know the tonal accents of her name. So I'm gonna say it like a white person. She wrote Empress Dowager Cixi. She wrote Wild Swans. She also wrote a super controversial book on Chairman Mao that is banned in China. I think Wild Swans is also banned in China. But the one I want to recommend is Wild Swans. Also, just super impactful emotionally because it's a book about her life, her mother's life, and her maternal grandmother's life. So it's a lineage of 3 women and their relationships and their lives and what they experienced through a very terrible and disruptive era in Chinese history. So it's from the warlords era through to the Mao era, and then the author, she's the one telling this story. Her life takes place at the end of the Mao era into like New World China, after China opened its doors to the Western world. So it's just a very interesting look into Chinese history and Chinese culture, and it gives you an understanding of why Chinese society has developed into the way it is. Which is interesting for me because I came to Canada when I was very young. So growing up here, you kind of get this weird dysphoria as an Asian American, where you view Asian culture, especially Chinese culture, as something that is so backward. But then when you look at Chinese history, you're like, oh, right, people just out here trying to survive. And I can't really shit on that because I'm so privileged living in North America. Who am I to talk shit about certain government policies when all they've done is try and create a place for people to survive and slowly progress to the point where they're privileged enough to talk about human rights, talk about, environmental issues, all of these things. So essentially, if you're interested at all in Chinese history and culture, it's a really great book, but it also does a lot of excellent character development because you see these women and their strength and their dedication to their families, to themselves, to this crazy notion of patriotism. It's very interesting.
Why do you think her books get banned?
Oh, China just doesn't like books that talk shit about Chairman Mao or the Communist Party.
And she does that?
It's just...
in your books?
Yeah, so I don't want to give away like a huge chunk of the emotional turmoil in this book, but there's a long portion of the book where she talks about what her parents suffered through. Both her parents worked as a part of the Communist Party. They worked as government officials or party members, and it was during a time where anybody could be persecuted for anything. Just, if someone points a finger at you and suddenly you're getting dragged through the streets, kneeling on broken glass, people are like shaming you, shaming your cows. Like, it was a really bad time for everyone, but it's very interesting to see that her parents had to suffer through this when they were a part of the Communist Party, and I think that's a rare thing to see. Which the Communist Party does not like to look back at. They were like, ooh, yeah, we know we fucked up. We don't want to see that anymore.
Don't acknowledge it.
Take it away.
Yeah. Can I guess what your next one is?
Yes.
Is it Becoming?
No.
Is that your honorable mention?
No.
Oh, okay.
Okay, here's the thing. I read Becoming, and it was really good. I still highly recommend it to every person. Just read Becoming.
Also a book Wendy gave to me to read, but I wasn't reading, and it's already back at her parents' place. I ain't ever gonna get her copy anyway. You gave it to me in January, I'm pretty sure.
You should definitely still read it.
Yes.
It's lovely, and I've heard that Michelle recorded the audio book version, and apparently it's really lovely to hear her narrate her own book. I'm sorry, Michelle. It was not on my recommended list, but I'm glad you brought it up because I do recommend that everyone read it. I think maybe that's not quite my cup of tea. It was very inspirational. It was impactful, but I was in a moment where I wanted to be destroyed emotionally, and Michelle's book was like so uplifting that it didn't quite match the criteria I was going for in 2019.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's why Educated, such a hit.
Educated was such a hit, Wild Swan such a hit, because you are just getting emotionally wrecked that entire book. It's also long, so it's an extended period of pain and suffering. The next book is also just, it hurts. It really, really hurts.
Okay.
It's called The Space Between Us. Essentially, it's about this Indian woman who lives in the slums, who is working as a housemaid, cook, caretaker type person for this rich family where this woman lives. Her husband has died. She has one daughter. Her daughter's husband also lives in the same household. This woman who lives in the slums has her own daughter, and it's about the weird status relationship between her and her boss, essentially. And there's a lot of issues related to status and money and friendship, and also a sense of, if you have all this money, how do you look at someone who is working for you but who is also emotionally connected to you? It's very sad. Right now, even just thinking about it, I don't want to give anything away. It's just quite sad. That was the book that had me depressed for maybe almost a week straight. I read it in like a day and a half because it's quite short and a very easy read. But at the end, you don't get any kind of happy ending. It's just a very realistic, very, I don't even know how to describe it. Just, you're sad, but you've accepted it.
Another book Wendy also recommended to me. I gotta go find it at a library or something. But
yeah.
Wendy just wants to wreck me, but I'm fine with
that.
The
space between us will destroy you. You will cry. The other two, maybe. I think Educated,
Probably
you might tear up a little bit. Wild Swans, I don't know if you're ever going to read it, but you might feel like just a lot of sympathy for these people in certain times. But The Space Between Us, ooh. From like chapter 0.5 on, it's just emotional wreckage. But I recommend it if you're into that kind of thing, which I was in 2019 because that seemed to be what I wanted to read.
I love getting emotional about all forms of art, so I'm here for it.
Ooh, this was not really on my list, but I also read The Girl on the Train.
Okay.
I never watched the movie. The book, very good. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 9 out of 10. But that is...
I feel like our roommate said she didn't like it. I can't remember if it was her or someone else.
Oh, I really enjoyed the book. I never watched the movie, and I've heard that the movie kind of sucked.
I was fine with the movie. I mean, it's Emily Blunt. I'm there for Emily Blunt movie.
Love Emily Blunt. I think it was mostly the direction of the movie. But I do recommend you check out the book. I think the character development and the storyline probably was developed a lot better than they were able to do in the movie. And I get it. It's a very hard book to make into a movie because a lot of the plot flows inside people's heads and it's just through emotions. So
to get away from doing a movie that's just voiceover.
Yeah.
And they didn't do voiceover, I don't think, on The Girl on the Train. I think it was just through action and dialogue. But I remember, I think what they chose to do, it was less about character development because you have like, 2-hour movie? And more about the mystery.
Like who done it.
The thriller aspect of it. I was fine. I was fine with that. I was thinking it was, I think at around the time it was being compared to like Gone Girl, as in like that kind of mystery thing. It's not a Gone Girl, but interesting enough for me to watch. I was fine with it.
I think the book is a lot better at getting you involved in the whodunit aspect as well as her character development, where she kind of has to figure out and come to terms with who she is and what she's done. Anyway, no spoilers, but my actual recommendation is Works Well with Others. It is a nonfiction. It sounds like a self-help, and it's not really a self-help. It's written by the editor of GQ. I don't know if he's still there. I don't know. Again, I should have done some research, but whatever. Essentially, it's about his journey into this workplace and some things he's had to learn and adapt to and deal with along the way. And I think it's just a very helpful book for young professionals or people just dealing with other people, which is all of the time. If you're in high school, I feel like you could already read this book and kind of get a sense of how to properly handle yourself and other people in most situations.
That's good.
Yeah, so it's a very helpful book. He's also quite funny. He injects a lot of slice of life details that are supposed to be somewhat educational. Like you are learning things from his anecdotes, which I think really beefs up his book a lot. I think his best chapter would be how to deal with assholes, because that's something that you just kind of have to deal with, and not all of us know how to deal with it in an effective way that allows you to continue a working relationship.
Instead it's just simmering anger.
Yeah, so like people handle in different ways. You simmer in anger and never do anything about it, or some people get very confrontational, which leads to conflict, and that kind of ruins the workplace dynamic. But he has a lot of good tips on how to deal with assholes, castles, as well as interviewing and getting used to the job that you're in and getting rid of that sense of imposter syndrome. There it is.
We've literally talked about it.
Kind of getting over imposter syndrome. So I think it's just a very helpful book. It only got an 8 out of 10 for me because, I don't know, just like enjoyment level wasn't the pain that I needed that year.
Didn't wreck you.
Didn't wreck me emotionally.
2019, the year Wendy got wrecked.
Yeah.
Or wanted to get wrecked.
Yeah, I just think if people are going to listen to my recommendation and try some of these books out, maybe this would be helpful for some people instead of being sad and depressed and crying over the rest of my recommendations. This one actually could help you in your real life.
And I always think it's good to throw in some nonfiction in there.
Yeah, I love reading nonfiction. Actually, no, that's a lie. I started out hating reading nonfiction, and then my dad was like, grow some brain cells. And then I was like, oh, you're right. I probably should read things that are not novels. So I've tried to incorporate a lot of nonfiction into my reading repertoire.
Well, it's also like with fiction books, you got to pick the right ones, right? With nonfiction, not all of them are bangers.
Yeah, that's why I feel like when I find a good nonfiction author, I'm like, I gotta buy all their books. I gotta read all of their books, which is what happened with Freakonomics, which I also read in 2019.
Right.
I think they've written maybe like 4 or 5 books. I think I have like 3 on my shelf. I've read Freakonomics. The other 2 that I have are on the list for this year.
For me, it's probably going to be quick because, again, I didn't really read a lot this year, and the stuff I read I either don't fully remember because it happened in January. I mean, I remember the ones I read in November, and that one was one of the ones you gave me for my birthday, and that was The Red Circle. That one was really, really good. No, it's not The Red Circle.
Also, I nailed it! Kim was totally eyeing that graphic novel up, and then I snatched it, and I gave it to her without knowing that.
Yeah.
Ugh, bless.
It's not The Red Circle. It's something circle. But no, it's just a look at Indigenous people and their time in the residential schools and how do you go about healing and ending the cycle of alcoholism and abuse that has come up in kids who were sexually abused, who were torn away from their culture in these residential schools. Very, very good. I read it twice.
Oh.
Well, I only brought 2 graphic novels on my trip, which apparently was a mistake. And then I finished Paper Girl series there. Pretty decent ending to that. But I'm just going to go with books that I'm just going to briefly recommend that I've read. And I continue to like kind of give out to people because I think they're good, or they're good like gateways to graphic novels sometimes. I'm going to start with, though, I don't have it right now because it's out on Lend, but I probably said it before, 1,000 Splendid Sons. Probably my favorite book. I think I even talked about it last time, so I'll be quick about it. But it's historical fiction talking about the war over in Afghanistan, and it's the same author as The Kite Runner, Kelly Hosseini. But this one I love more because it focuses on 2 women. They come from very different backgrounds, but they end up having to support each other and live with each other, and it's heartwarming and devastating, and I cry both times I've read it. I probably would cry again because
we're all about recommending these pure devastation books.
Yeah. Wendy didn't bring up her books for some reason.
Oh, most of the books that I read in 2019 are already at my parents' place.
A gateway graphic novel for people that try to get them. I've literally bought 2 of these and given them to friends. It's called This One Summer. My sister, I think, had it one time, and I had to get my own copy. But I do love the author, Mariko Tamaki, and her sister also, like, draws. But she did Skim, and she did Super Mutant Teenagers, and she did the Supergirl origin story that I love and I like kind of cried in. So it's just I like the art. It's different from what I usually pick up. It's done in basically just shades of blue, black and white kind of deal, and it's just a very real story about just like this girl goes through her family's cabin every single year, and there's shit going down between her and her mom deals with mental health, and that's obvious, and she ends up getting infatuated with this boy who's older than her and probably in high school and works at the convenience store spot, and he ends up like, there's like this side story of he's definitely impregnated this girl, he's being a dick about it. There's just a lot of stuff going on, and you're just seeing her go through probably puberty and just a growing period. It's very coming of age story. The conclusion's not really like, oh, yeah, happy.
Yeah.
It's realistic, I think.
Which I think we all appreciate now. We've seen too many of those Disney-esque happy endings that we want something a little more...
It's open-ended, basically.
Yeah, open-ended is the correct word.
So that's This One Summer. It's great. A play that I love to give out and recommend. Wendy's read it. It's called The Virgin Trial. The playwright is British. She's Kate Henning, and this is book 2 of her trilogy, the Queenmaker trilogy. I've seen 2 of them on stage in Stratford, and I read it before I watched this one, and I just think it's brilliant. She takes historical periods or scandals that happened in the royal family back around King Henry VIII. That man. Basically, this takes a point in time of a very young Queen Elizabeth I and a scandal that happened around the time her father, King Henry VIII, was dead, and her younger brother, Edward was on the throne, and there was an attempt on his life, and it's a very simplistic play where she's being interrogated. She's being interrogated because there was like this scandal that she might have slept with this much older man who was taking advantage of her.
Thomas Seymour, ya dick. Basically, her kind of stepfather, because the last woman that Henry VIII was married to, Catherine, remarried after King Henry died, and she married Thomas. And Thomas did some inappropriate things to a very, very young Elizabeth. So
she takes these historical events, reimagines them, kind of like if you watch The Crown on Netflix, where we have no idea what was said behind closed doors, but I mean, it's very intriguing what could have been, and it's very believable when you see it demonstrated. And so this, again, updates the language. It deals with a lot of feminist issues, especially like, what's her image? She's always betrayed. She's the virgin queen. She's the queen that never got married and wanted basically no power to ever go to a husband, and so she never had kids. Correct?
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just it's a interesting read, and I like the dynamic between her and her sister, Mary, also known as Bloody Mary. I recommend if you like reading plays, and even if you don't, I think it's a pretty
this was
read.
Probably one of the first plays I've ever read. The first one probably would have been The Cursed Child, Harry Potter. This was probably number 2, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was really good. Also because I'm just such trash for that historical period that I will gobble up anything from that era that comes my way. If you haven't watched the BBC documentaries on YouTube, shout out to BBC and their documentaries on King Henry VIII and all of his mistresses and wives. It's great.
Yeah, King Henry, what a guy. The last one I actually kind of forget a bit. It's been a while since I've read it, but it's called I'm Not Here. It's a very simplistic kind of, it's very different again from the usual style I do, but I really like this black and white. It focuses, it's not about dialogue, it is about just mundane things. Like she's doing the dishes, she's just sitting on her bed, and you have the panels just focusing on smaller things. And I really like that, but there's still a story in there, and I think, if I remember correctly, she left her parents relatively early on, and it didn't end well. Things there, you get flashbacks to her childhood, and it wasn't always great, but she at one point wants to go home. It's a really weird, when I first read it, I'm like, is she real? Is she in the place of someone else because her father kind of ignored her? And she's like, I don't know. I have to reread it again, but I do remember enjoying it. And it's a really quick read because if it is just it's less dialogue and more pictures, I guess. It was interesting. It's a recommend from me, but yeah.
And it's called I'm Not Here.
I'm Not Here. I mean, you can probably read it tonight if you wanted.
Do you have anything from 2019 that you recall reading and not enjoying?
See, I didn't read a whole lot, and I can't remember the thing I read back in the beginning of January.
That's fine. I can just go into mine and then we'll just call it a day.
Yeah.
So I think in all of 2019, I only gave one book 1 star. I don't do that very often. Even when it's kind of bad, I give it like 2 or 3 stars. The book...
Pity stars.
Exactly. No, Unplug is a book that was rated 1 star in 2019 from me. Not because it's a terrible book, just terrible for me. It was such a snooze fest for me to get through. Unplug is basically, as you can probably guess from the title of the book, about how to distance yourself from social media, from your computer, from TV, Netflix, whatever, and try to work on meditating and everything that I'm not into. You know, I think some people might find this a helpful book to help them relax and learn methods to cope with the overstimulation from social media. I am not one of those people who gets very depressed when I look at the news or when there's a lot going on in my life or in the world. I just didn't find it very helpful for me. Therefore, it was not a very interesting read for me. I also don't meditate. And I've tried it before. Sometimes if I'm doing like a group meditation in some sort of random class situation I'm in, sometimes that works out because you get the vibe of just relaxing. I typically fail inwardly because I'm still thinking about all these other things, and that's literally what you're not supposed to do. Yeah. But I think my meditating kind of does not look like that. I need time that's quiet to have time to just think about all the things that I need to think about, and that's my way of coping with maybe anxiety. So 1 star, not worth my time.
I feel like books that talk about distancing yourself from social media or how do you unplug, I feel like there's a bunch of articles that you can get for free online that say the same stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised if you read that and it was like not a lot of new information. So it's like you're reading it and you're like,
I've also never looked into methods of meditating or unplugging because that's just not for me. This book I actually won as a prize at a conference for mental health in university and graduate students. So yay, free book. I read it and donated it immediately because I was like, I don't have space on my bookshelf for this nonsense.
Not worth.
Yeah. I'm sorry to the authors of this book. I'm sure your book was helpful for a lot of people, but
not you. That's fine.
Not me.
Do you have new goals
for year? 2020? No, but I have become more materialistic with my books, even more than I already was, because I have started an Agatha Christie collection, which is probably not wise because I already have too many books and Xiaomin, my partner, also has a lot of books. But you know what? This is what we're going for. I forced him to start a Stephen King collection, and I have started my Agatha Christie collection. Just a quick update for 2020. I think I am 12 to 14 books in, and it's been a great time.
It's only March. Hot damn.
I know, Kim. I think I read maybe 8 to 10 books.
Gonna smash that 20 goal.
But that's the dangerous thing because in 2019 I had a lot of months where I read a lot of books and then I fell into kind of a reading rut. So that's what happened in October where I just didn't feel like reading, and I had a book going in October but I just didn't finish it in October.
Burnt out.
But because I feel like this is a very new genre for me, I've never read murder mystery before. It's just very exciting for me to get into, and I think they're typically very easy reads. They're very entertaining. So I'm excited for 2020. No new goals, but if I one up 2019 and 2018, that would be fantastic. I think that'll be
such a failure.
That would be my new goal, to read, make sure I have something to fill in for every month, and also if I can read 21 plus books in 2020, I would be very happy. I think I've got a good start.
And right now for me, I'm rereading my graphic novels because I'm in a bit of a purging mood with the self-quarantining that's kind of happening right now. And I do think like there are a lot to move when I move out. So I want to kind of cut them down, maybe sell or donate ones that I'm not as holding dear to my heart.
Yeah.
I just reread my Angel and Faith graphic novel series, which is the first one I ever got, my gateway one. So if you're a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, I reread them and I really do enjoy them, and the art's great on them. So I'm on the fence. Do I give them up? Do I not? But rereading them is like, quite a gem. So yeah, that's what I'm doing right now.
I don't think we have to be very strict with this. We're just not strict with this.
I never am. So.
Reading is just fun, you know? Just read however much you want, whatever you feel like. I think it's a great alternative to watching endless YouTube videos at night, which I tend to do, but then I'm reminded of this reading challenge and it forces me to do something that's a little more productive for my brain.
I also think with Wendy moving out soonish to go live with her husband, how dare she?
I know, right?
But I'll get over it, I'm sure. We're maybe going to try to read books at the same time. We've been wanting to read Six of Crows.
Yes. Read with Cindy. If you don't know who she is, she's a booktuber. She just sells these books so well, and I really want to get into
sounds like we're gonna get wrecked in
fantasy
them. Yeah.
Because that's also another genre that I read a lot maybe as a young adult, and these are young adult books, so that might be where the majority of science fantasy books are.
Yeah.
But I haven't read it in years, so I think it might be fun to get back into. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's try co-reading and
that'll really
own...
push me to read if I'm out of sync with reading, and I'm kind of back into it, so it comes and goes. But if you're reading and pushing me to read, you'd be like, oh my goodness, did you get to chapter whatever? Like something happened. I'll probably be like, oh, I gotta read it. So
I'm excited. Gotta get a library card because I'm not buying that shit.
No.
Also, they look so thick. They're so thick that I'm like, I just don't have space for you guys. I'm sorry. Okay, so on our to-read list for both of us in the future, Six of Crows and Crooked Kingdom. It's a... What's the 2 version of trilogy?
A duology?
No, that's not
duet.
Right. This is why we need to read nonfiction. We're dumb as hell.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Nudity. If you want to listen to this episode or previous episodes that we've done, you can find us anywhere you listen to your podcast, I'm pretty sure. You can find us on YouTube when he does the video edits for that. And you can also follow us on Instagram, all at Nudity Podcast.
Yeah, I'll put up the covers of all the books that we've talked about because I literally forgot all of the author names, sometimes even the title, maybe said the title wrong here and there. So if you need more guidance with our recommendations, check out the video podcast.
Also, these episodes are really easy to Instagram. I don't have to think too hard. Just take pictures of the books. So it's
Yay.
great. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.